pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Thank you. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home.
So, thank you for having me here. I'm incredibly honored to be out here with you all tonight. My name is Thad Riley. What I'd like to do is for about 15 minutes share a little bit about myself, what I believe in, and then what we're going to do on day one. Does that sound pretty fair? Okay. And then for the last 15 minutes, I see a clock in there, so I should be all right. Then we'll do some Q&A, and then I'm kind of known by my wife at least for staying forever after the meetings end. So I would love to talk to you and hear your story. My favorite part of all this has been traveling throughout New Hampshire and talking with folks and hearing their stories. Does that sound good?
Yes.
All right, so I live in Brentwood, which is right outside of Exeter, with my wonderful wife, Melanie. We have 6 kids, which most of the time can be pretty horrible. Sometimes it's good. We have 4 left at home. 2 of them, the 2 oldest, are graduates of Liberty University. One of them is an entrepreneur in San Antonio, and the other one just started work as a mental health counselor at a Virginia public school. She's excited because her governor is Glenn Youngkin. The other 4 kids, 3 of them are in public high school, so I have a deep knowledge of what's going on in our public schools today. I also have 1 child in middle school. In fact, I will tell you a lot of the reasons of why I'm running for governor have to do with my experience in the public schools. I served on school board in 2018. One of the Democrats in town slipped up and started complaining that we didn't have anybody running for school board. And I was at a soccer game and I heard that. I said, I'll run. I can do that. And I looked at my wife. I said, what do you think? She goes, you'd be good at that. His face was like red. And I ended up running, and the Democrats heard about it, so they put in a candidate against me. And he did really good. They had the whole Democrat machine, and he got, I won by 85%. And I told him, I said, don't even do this. Don't even do this to this poor guy, because everybody in our community knew that I cared about the kids. I had the kids in school, I knew what the issues were, and I had to run on my own because they had a machine behind me. But I knew I was going to win. There was no doubt. I don't have anything to do with losing. Never lost an election, not interested in doing it. 2018, Brentwood went blue. My heart like stopped. I'm like, we had this wonderful guy who was a state rep. He got booted. We lost everything. And everybody was online going, Brentwood's now blue. Brentwood's a Democratic town. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. No lie, that night after we counted votes, my buddy, one of the selectmen, called me and asked me to come up and help count votes. I sat in the parking lot, I sent a text to a guy, I said, you never believe what we're doing tomorrow. He goes, what's that? I said, we're starting the Brentwood Republicans. He goes, we don't have that here. I said, we got it now. And I got everything together, we went out and we launched it about 2 months later. We had our first meeting, and 3 people showed up. 4 with me. And about 5 minutes in, the other guy in the room fell asleep. I was the only person under 75. His wife's like, I'm sorry, should I wake him up? He ain't coming back if you wake him. We lose 25% of our members right there. Don't wake him. 4 months later, we had the 4th of July parade. We had over 50 people representing the Brentwood Republicans in that parade. We had bikes, we had floats, we had everything. It was on. We brought energy, strength, and conviction into our beliefs and into that town. I recruited the chair of the school board to run. And she went in and she took it back. Melissa Litchfield, a true conservative, a true patriot, She won that election, and she has done a fantastic job for Brent. She represents them. Democrats crossed the line. She was a nightmare for the Democratic Party because of all of her work in the school. I will tell you this, when I win this primary, I'm a nightmare for the Democrats. They don't know what to do with someone like me, who is so highly invested in the schools. And I'll get to that a little bit more in just a minute. My wife Melanie is fantastic. She's just the best. She doesn't like politics, by the way. Isn't that funny? So we have good boundaries. She's a hero to me. You know, when all this mess started a couple of years ago, she works in a nursing home, and she teaches fitness classes. And I will tell you, every day she woke up, she didn't know anything about it. Did anybody in here wipe down your groceries? Remember that stuff? We didn't know what was going on. And she was so strong and courageous. She went in every day and she taught these classes. And these folks were in quarantine, they were locked down. And there was my wife like a ball of fire bringing them joy. And I'd watch her go in, and during nights, she would be sleeping. She's like, I don't know if I'm going to catch this thing and bring it in, and people are going to start dying. I don't know what's going to happen. But she had a purpose, and she was focused, and she came through for so many people. She's a ray of light to me, and she's a ray of light to them, and our kids like her a whole lot better than me, because I kind of do a lot of discipline, so she's nice. And I think it was September 5th was the day I went on a run. I was running in the thing called Reach the Beach. So I got out early. It was a sunrise run, and I was going out on a 10-mile hilly run, and I was running down the road, and I was praying. I like to tell people how I got into this. And I can't explain everything to you, but 3 words came to mind as I was praying. Run for governor. And I thought, well, you probably got the wrong guy on this one, God. Thank you, though. I appreciate it. I came home and I knew what I was supposed to do. I was so sure I didn't tell my wife for 3 weeks. I didn't say a word to her. And I've been honest with the story about the meeting, because I'm not a politician, obviously, so I just like to say what's going on. Is that okay? All right, then you guys can figure me out from there. So I waited 3 weeks, and I finally was like, all right, I'm going to tell her this story, and I know I need to be careful with it. So I told her, and she goes, are you sure? And I looked right at her, and I lied, and I said, nope. And I said, I need a few more days. A few more days later, I told her, I said, I'm absolutely sure. And she said, I know my purpose is to help people. I know my purpose is to do good. Apparently that's your purpose too. And that was it. So on October 29th, we began this whole process. And that's the why. That's what brought me to this place. It's a little different of a story than you might hear from a career politician. You know, my last name obviously doesn't exactly resonate. Riley, right? My dad sold switches. That's what he did. He traveled the whole country. I didn't know my dad very much growing up. I saw him sometimes on the weekends, but he traveled the country selling switches at factories. He worked hard. We've always worked hard in my family. My mom was the one who pretty much raised me. She raised me as a reflection of her childhood. You see, at age 11, her father, who was one of the most notorious and horrible drug dealers in the city of Dayton, Ohio, burned the house down on her. My mom was homeless. I thank God all the time for the American Red Cross. I love the American Red Cross. She got connected with them. She got to stay in a shelter for a few days, and she got clothes. She watched everything burn up in her life. Do we have a drug problem in New Hampshire? Does it affect families every day?
Yes.
It affected my family too. It affected my mom's life. It's important to me that we start doing new things, better things to help our youth. But we also got to do some stuff with immigration I'll talk about in a minute, okay? And she always was grateful. That was the thing about my mom. She had secondhand clothes. Her sister couldn't stand it. Couldn't stand that she had to wear secondhand clothes. We'll never talk about that. But my mom had them. She was grateful. So can you imagine that she raised me to be grateful? In every circumstance that was faced. I faced a lot of adversity though growing up. I had to be removed from 2 schools because of bullying and getting picked on. I was a chubby kid, they targeted me, that was my life. But I learned how to not lose hope with people. I faced a ton of adversity in my life. And at one point, I weighed 400 pounds. And no lie, I can't believe we're here in this moment. 13 years ago today, I changed my life. On April 14th of 2019, it's so funny to say that. I went for a run. For the first time, I ran 2 blocks and thought I was going to die. Every neighbor, if you're going to do this, by the way, every one of your neighbors will be outside. They were all outside. I never saw anybody in my neighborhood till that day. Everybody was outside. I ran 2 blocks and thought I was going to die. I ran every day for 6 months. I finished it by running the Columbus Half Marathon. I ran every step. I don't know anything about losing. I don't know nothing about it. Wouldn't have anything to do with it. I keep going, keep pushing. And that was important. That was really important. You see, you can't come in as an outsider. Glenn Youngkin knows this in Virginia. You cannot come in as an outsider in the political world and not have faced great adversity in your life. In 2018, when we launched the Brentwood Republicans, what do you think the Democrats had to say on Facebook when we did that? Do you think they all came after us? Do you think they said all kinds of stuff? They told us we were going to fail all the time. When we announced our candidate, they told us we were going to fail. Every meeting, they talked about it. They're so mad at us at parades, by the way. They're so mad. And I would sit there and be like, yeah, you'll be okay. You got to stand in the back. They had like a lady dressed up as a Statue of Liberty and some guy on stilts, and it was like 80 degrees, and he's hot, and he's mad. He's the chair of the Democratic Party. And then they got 3 other people. You know, we had kids on bikes, and we had Humvees. I was in the back of one of those Army Ranger trailer Humvee things, and I got the American flag, and my beautiful wife sitting next to me, she's like, this is so weird. I'm like, we're okay, we're okay. But we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun. And I pushed right back online against Democrats. They want to push on us, I will push right back. You see, you have to be able to handle what's going on with the woke mob. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
But you cannot handle the woke mob if you've never faced adversity in your life. You have to understand the way things work in our world, and we have to have a governor, we have to have a leader who is not distracted by polls, what the media says, and their political career. That is so true, isn't it? The next governor of New Hampshire has to lead by one singular idea. I'm going to do good. I'm going to do good. And if that doesn't look right in the polls, then we'll have to figure it out. But we're going to do good. Critical race theory is alive and well in New Hampshire public schools. I'm going to tell you this. I got a message. And a friend of mine in town, he said, Dad, can you come over? He said, I need to talk to you. I go on his back porch. He says, I didn't know who to turn to. I need to tell you what happened. His son come home from school, and this was 3 days earlier. It took him 3 days to be able to talk to anybody about it. Came home, cried for 40 minutes. He was looking at his hands, crying. You know why? Because an adult in his school had told him that he had benefited from his whiteness, and they had attributed it to slavery. Now this boy is thinking of the horrors of slavery in America in the 1800s. And he is now equating this with the color of his skin. He won't stop crying. This is right when he got off the bus. I know this kid. He plays tackle football in the yard sometimes with my kid. He tackles. He's tough. I've never seen him cry in the neighborhood. They never saw anything like it. 40 minutes of crying because of his whiteness, and he's stuck looking at what? The skin on his hands. This is being taught. Very simple. Critical race theory is not a course. Nobody has critical race theory for the juniors to take. It's not an 8th grade elective. It is a political ideology that has been pushed as a bad narrative into our public schools through superintendents and leftist school boards that have lost their ever-loving mind, along with gender theory. I can tell you specific cases about that because one of my kids was involved when they thought it was going to be okay to teach pronouns one day in a class. And it's not okay. And they didn't know it was my kid. But they found out 5 minutes later. And then they didn't believe me. And so I just went in and I said, who's in your class? I'll get their parents to send, and then we all sent letters. And that was it. The next governor has got to understand that these political ideologues are working in our schools. And we have to have somebody, when the complaint is sent in, that the education commissioner, the education board, has the guts to stand up and do the right thing. On day 1, I will establish the education advisory group. I'm going to handpick one parent from each of our 10 counties. They're going to form a board, they're going to come in the governor's office, and they are going to sit down every 2 weeks with myself, the education board, and the education commissioner. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to tell us what's going on. And we are going to listen, and we're going to pay attention, and we're going to follow up about what is going on in New Hampshire schools. And we are going to be very, very present. That office is not going to be run from Concord. I don't even like staying in one place too long, if that's okay. We're going to be moving throughout the entire state. And we are going to fight and do good. And we are not going to let the next generation be hijacked by a group of leftist political ideologues that think the woke mob is a force and the media is a force that nobody can deal with. What happened in Virginia? Go on YouTube, look up Dem Moms for Young Kids. How did he win a state where Biden won by 10 points? Because of the parents. Because of the 2 Democrats who've left their party and now support, fund, and help with my campaign. Why? One reason. They don't agree with me that I'm pro-life. I'm pro-life. That's all there is to it. There's nowhere to go with it. I'm just simply pro-life. I've always been that way. I thought it was great. My mother, true story, my feisty mom, she's like Marie on Everybody Loves Raymond, by the way. Except my mom's mean. She'd be meaner than me sometimes. She was accused when I was in high school. She was picking an abortion clinic, and she was accused of putting glue in the locks. You know what the nurses didn't know? There were cameras rolling the whole time on that entrance. It was one of the nurses that did it. They found out, and the police made them turn in the tapes. They found the tapes when they did an investigation. My mom was actually never put in jail for it. But that was the way I was raised. I totally agree. Why? Why are we pro-life? Well, there's a lot of reasons. For me, it's the foundational scriptures. It's my beliefs, okay? But I want to say something else. We will be judged in 100 years. 3D imaging. You ever see it on social media? Some young family posts a picture of that baby, and they're so excited. And they're like the blue squirts out of something, and the family's like all there, and they're cheering. 3D imaging of ultrasounds. And we see the joy of life created. We can change New Hampshire. We can change the country. We have got to stop bowing to political ideologues. I heard today on a podcast here in New Hampshire, the New Hampshire Journal, said, well, don't talk about abortion. Really? What do we have to be afraid of? It's an important issue. We need to be able to speak truth into these issues and not worry about what the woke mob's going to do. We need to worry about doing good and not worrying about what everybody thinks of us and what the polls say and all these things say. Immigration, I'll get to really quick because I want to dive into Q&A. It's very simple. Let's not reinvent some of the best policies. Do you guys like the idea of what Greg Abbott's done in Texas?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? So we've been talking about that. Very simple. Okay. Any illegal immigrants that are sent in by transportation companies, we're going to empower law enforcement and tell them, we've got your back. Stop the vans, stop the buses. Anybody who flies in to Manchester with a federal plane, that's against the law. And they will understand it's against the law. So here's what we're going to do. If you have a transportation company and you bring illegal immigrants into New Hampshire, you're breaking the law. So we are going to warn you, and then we'll end up impounding your vehicles. And we're also going to sue you to pay for the transportation to Washington, D.C. of the illegal immigrants. That's going to be out of your pocket, and we are going to ban you permanently from doing business in the state of New Hampshire. It's not a stretch, and I believe right now that bill would become a law to ban those businesses. If transportation companies are knowingly involved in illegal immigrants,
Yes, they are.
if they are knowingly involved, we can ban them from doing business in New Hampshire. We need to stand up and we need to do good. A lot of the stuff you can read about me on the website. The good news is my first name is Thad, so it's thadforgovernor.com. You can read about day one. I'm not a politician, so what we'll do is we're just going to get to work on day one. I don't know how to do anything else. When I was a leader in the telecom industry, that's what we did. I was a turnaround specialist. They would send me into different locations, different giant retail stores, different districts, and I would go in and I'd be like, so all your managers got fired, huh? And I would go in and turn the place around. I'd hang out for a while, rebuild, and we'd move on. I'm used to those types of situations. The governor and I, the current governor, we couldn't be more polar opposite. On day one, we need to open every filing cabinet and we need to get to work. And I'll tell you this, have a pretty good reputation for working with folks. I know there's going to be a lot of people, a lot of smart people who are going to want to work with us in Concord. Hopefully not just in Concord, right? Throughout the whole state. So that's probably pretty good. I think I've got about 12 minutes for Q&A, but I'm going to stay after 2, so.
I got them here.
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry.
I think you've explained this pretty well, but maybe you could elaborate. How are you different than Sonoma?
Yeah,
Most of these questions are for both, so we're going to hear this again.
the fastest version I can tell you is I don't like labels. Does anybody like labels? I've never liked labels. I'm Gen X. I'm not much for labels. Very simple. You know, I would be what you would call a conservative. People are going to label with a big focus and a push on traditional education. Okay? My kids are in the schools. His aren't. He doesn't have a vested interest in any way, shape, or form. I believe he's a politician, an elite politician who plays political games.
Yes, he does.
I'm not into any of that kind of stuff. I'm into just doing good, making decisions, sticking to my guns. And that's pretty much what, and let me say one thing. I don't think I've ever had more fire and more frustration like many of you did when you read about the redistricting map chaos. Let me tell you the approach I would have. If I knew that the reps in the House were starting to work on a redistricting map, I would have been in there with them on day 1, listening, paying attention, or at least sent people to say, what are they working on? I would have given my feedback on day 2. We would have worked together the entire time. And then when it passes and I sign it, I sit in the back and say, look at the great work these guys did. I get joy out of watching other people get elevated. That was a joke completely to me. To say he's going to veto it, and then by the way, we're going to do something else. How many months were wasted of our state reps? So that is one very big difference.
Speaking of jokes, any comment on Sununu's joke about President Trump at the gridiron dinner? Keep it clean.
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny. I was talking to my youth pastor from high school today. Last summer, I hosted a roast for him. He was a very funny guy, very sarcastic. I hosted a roast for him down in North Carolina. You know where he was? He was sitting right here next to me the whole time. When I want to talk bad about something, I'll just do it to their face, right? I'd at least do it with them in the room. I'm not much, obviously you can tell I'm a pretty positive guy, so I'm not much for talking bad about folks anyway. The language, the use of language, incredibly inappropriate. And the whole thing, you can be funny without being like that. You're the leader in New Hampshire. How about you represent us? How about we don't play those types of games? $100,000, whatever, how much that dollar dinner was? And you go in there and you make comments like that, and you don't think they're going to get out, and then you blow it off by saying, well, we've got serious problems in our world today. It's incredibly appropriate, and obviously I don't know of any other politician that I can even think of that would say anything like that.
Concerning the Sununu deal for businesses getting tax exemptions for building low-income housing, hopefully with the purpose of getting you to build back better federal funds. Comment on that at all?
I mean, talk about a distraction piece in so many ways. You know, the lady next door to me, she's retired. She sold her house. She moved in with family just last week. She sold it for about $100,000 more than it's probably worth. Families are having problems because they used to be able to live in towns together in New Hampshire. So as housing prices and all these things have skyrocketed, what kind of solutions do we have? I'm going to tell you this. I don't have a solution. I'll be very clear on that. But what I'm going to do is use every resource I possibly can to create housing for people who live and work in New Hampshire that is affordable, that is available. We have a massive supply and demand problem. Now, I don't really know what's going on with this housing that's being developed. Is it for illegal immigrants? Who is this housing for? Why are we spending our resource dollars over there when people in New Hampshire need help financially today?
Last question. By the way, many of these questions here you addressed
good.
earlier. What's your plan to rid New Hampshire of the corrupt voting machines?
Oh, yes.
So, you know what? I love that question because I screwed up and I didn't mention it. So listen, it's very simple. I was being interviewed recently, and the guy said, Was the election stolen? I said, look, I'm a guy who lives in Brentwood, New Hampshire. I'm limited to every bit of information that comes in. You want me to say this? I'm not going to say it. I'm going to talk facts with you. On day one, we need to follow DeSantis' lead in Florida, that unpopular guy down there. We're going to establish the Office of Election Integrity on day one, okay? And that office is going to get to work. We're going to establish hotlines. We're going to establish, I will tell you this, mail-in ballots have got to go. We have absentee ballots. Those absentee ballots have always been capable for the people of New Hampshire to fill out and vote properly. There is no need for mail-in ballots. We have seen disaster after disaster, okay? On the ballot machines, we need to get to work. I'm not going to give an answer on that. I don't have the answer until I can get inside and get to work. As an outsider, I don't have everything. Here's what it is. 58% of Republicans do not trust our elections. But here's the other piece of it. You want to do good for all of New Hampshire? Recognize the 30% of Democrats that don't trust our elections either. If that high of a percentage of people who live in New Hampshire don't trust our elections, one of the #1 jobs we have to establish before 2024, that Office of Election Integrity, has got to win back the faith, the trust of the people of New Hampshire, of us Granite Staters, right?
Yes.
We've got to earn it back, and we've got to work very, very hard, very efficiently, very quickly. The governor has zero interest in this. He has no vested interest at all. He won the last election by what, 63% vote? He doesn't care. It was in his favor. I haven't seen 1 ounce of anything that showed me that he cares. We got to establish that office. We got to put processes in place. I am a process guy, always have been. And we got to make sure it works, not for one election, but for the future and for the next generation, for your grandkids. It's got to work. Is that good?
Very good.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Aaron.
Welcome.
Thank you. Well, welcome, everybody. It's so good to see all of you tonight. And thank you so much for coming out. And thank you for having this. This is great. So, my campaign is about God, family, and country. Why? We are the premier country. We are the premier state in the Union because we put God first. If you go back to our founding fathers, they put God first. That's the thing that makes us different from any other country in the world, is that we put God first. We have to put him back on the altar and put him back in charge of this state. We've abandoned him all of this time, and that's why we're going down the tubes, because very clearly, God says he can bless us if we follow his rules. And those 10 commandments, they need to come back. They need to be on the wall of every school in this state, and we need to honor them again. Family, okay, so I am a mom, a stay-at-home mom, and when I came to New Hampshire, it was really interesting because I was looking for the Family Policy Council that Dr. Dobson talked about all the time in every state that kept an eye on the legislation and how it impacted our families. And so I was on ground zero in Amherst, New Hampshire, where they were putting in this new high school. And originally they were sending out newsletters and so forth, and I was starting to see those little red flags start flying up everywhere. So that's why I was looking for the Family Policy Council. And I finally ended up calling Focus on the Family and saying, where is it? And they said, we don't have one in New Hampshire. So, well, how did they get started, you know? And about 6 or 7 years later, I was able to prove myself to the people of New Hampshire, because you do not take everybody just because they come out with this great idea. You want them to prove themselves to you. And so 7 years later, I ended up founding Cornerstone Policy Research and working for our families, because they are the most important part. They're the fundamental building block of our society. And then we can go out, once we get our families under control and things are going well, then we can go out and start with our communities, our state, and our nation. Now, this governor that we have right now has been stomping all over your Constitution. That's right. He has totally taken away just the First Amendment. Stop and think about the First Amendment. What has he done? If you want to disagree with him, and I don't know any town meeting where there hasn't been some passion expressed, but if you want to express that passion at a executive council meeting that he's in charge of, guess what? We'll shut it down, and then we'll go and we'll have the next meeting at the police academy. And then after you are all sitting very quietly, we'll start nodding and having the state police go out and arrest 9 of you for simply being present at a public meeting.
Wow.
He's walked on your ability to assemble. He's walked on your ability to speak. He's walked on your ability to even have a belief system, right? And, oh, by the way, there were people who were congregating outside of in his neighborhood to protest and let their voices be known that they did not want certain things to happen. And one of those people happened to be press. He even had him arrested after having worked with his brother in their community to have an ordinance change without proper notice. He doesn't care about you. I've been working in the trenches for the last 20 some odd years, standing side by side with you all, trying to make sure that we had a good education system, that we had people who are actually teaching our children the fundamentals of reading, writing, and arithmetic, not indoctrinating them with sexual material at the first grade, second grade. What in the world are they doing? Parents are the primary stakeholders in their children's lives. That's something that you should be able to share your values with your children. And in the government-run schools, they ought not to be doing anything other than reading, writing, logical thinking, science, math. That's it. So when I become governor, this is what we're going to do. We are going to work with the legislature immediately and demand that they put a ban on this. And what we're going to actually have them do in the ban is enable any citizen in the state of New Hampshire who observes any of this going on to be able to make a lawsuit against that teacher, that school district, and not only that, but they will also, we are going to have the Department of Education remove their licenses.
Yes.
And put an end to this. They have no business stepping over the boundaries of parents. In fact, you know, this just absolutely sent me through the ceiling, was when I found out that there are teachers that are saying, well, it's a 12-year-old. If the 12-year-old doesn't want me to tell your parents, their parents, that I'm having gender confusion problems. That's not the role of a teacher or any administration. You have a right to know what's going on in your child's life.
Yes.
And shame on you.
That's gonna be, it's your school boards.
Well, it's not just the school boards, but the school boards have to quit taking their orders from the unelected New Hampshire School Boards Association as well.
Yes! Yes!
Thank you.
Tell us how you really feel. I'm not able to say anything tonight, honest.
So here's something else. I have these back there. There's several of them, and I just want to share information with you. But one of the things that's come up recently is it took place in Croydon, up over that way in the west. And someone raised the question about, is it a budget or is it ransom? If you have a budget, you got a certain amount of money, and this is what Bill O'Brien did when he was Speaker of the House. He said, we have this amount of money, and we're going to allocate that accordingly in our budget. If you have a ransom, however, somebody's going to tell you, and this is what a lot of schools do, this is how much money I want, but if you don't give it to me, your football team isn't going to be outfitted, right? You're going to lose the art teacher, you're going to lose the music teacher, you're going to lose French class, whatever it is, you're going to lose it. They're holding you for ransom. So what they did up at Croydon that I thought was marvelous was they looked at all of the schools around. The state of New Hampshire gives them about $4,000 per student, right? The charter school operates about $8,000 per student. The local religious school operates for $9,000. And they also tuition their students to a school, and that's about $9,000. So they think, you know what, $10,000 per student is sufficient. They cut their budget in half because they've had this epiphany. Well, I think the same thing ought to be applied at the state level as well. We ought to be saying to our state, we have X number of dollars, and this is how we're going to run it. And I'm going to work with the legislature and actually demand that last year we brought in X number of dollars and ran our state. This year, that's all you're going to get. If you get additional money because of cuts in taxes and so forth like that, which thank you very much to the legislators to do that, then the next year, maybe you can spend it, maybe you just turn around and give it back to the taxpayers, which is where it really ought to be going in the first place. So that's another thing that I would be doing. The other thing is that, you know, the Constitution is really the law of this land. And it's about time we started paying attention to it. So somebody asked about the voting machines. And I will tell you that I believe that the 2020 elections were stolen. I'm convinced that they were stolen. I've seen enough information out there that says that they were stolen. The New Hampshire Constitution in Article 32 specifically says how votes are supposed to be counted. By hand, in person, by the election officials. There has never been a constitutional amendment that said that we could go ahead and have mechanical means to count our votes. And so, if this governor were doing his job, he would get rid of those machines as soon as he knew what was going on. I was one of those people that went down to the State House and filed with the governor, with the Secretary of State, with the Attorney General's office, with the Speaker's office, and with the President of the Senate to let them know that this was a violation of our Constitution. The governor, when he knows that has happened, is supposed to take action and enforce the law. The law of the land is the Constitution. And has he done anything? Not to be done. So anyway, to give you a little bit of background about who I am, I'm the wife of a retired military person. I'm the mother of 3 military children and 1 military grandson. My dad served in the 442nd Regimental Combat during World War II. He became an auditor. My mom was an auditor as well at some point. I grew up in California, and We had our very first assignment in New England and fell in love with New England. So when when David finished his military service, we headed for New England. And we chose to come to New Hampshire before it was vote. We're not part of the Free State Project, but we did come here because we loved New Hampshire and we were looking forward to it. I continue to raise my daughter here. I helped to look at election fraud with the late Ed Nail and the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. I also helped to found the New Hampshire Center for Constitutional Studies. It was because of my involvement with the Family Policy Council that I really became invested in understanding the whole legislative process in New Hampshire. And the most fascinating thing to me was discovering the Executive Council and what it was and how it was put together and why we are so unique in the United States as a state. This is truly a volunteer state. We are the only state in the union that is so generous to our elected officials that we give them $100 a year. So, unlike in Blue Sununu, we will be working very, very hard to put you back in place. And let me tell you what a governor can do. A governor can enforce the law. A governor can be the commander-in-chief of our military, our militia. A governor can appoint officers. What the governor cannot do is he cannot mandate to every one of you what you can do with your life. He cannot tell you that you have to take a certain medication or a jab or anything else. He cannot tell you that you have to inhibit your breathing. There's so many things that this governor has continued to do. He puts the R in rhino. And not only that, he's been stomping on every one of our rights for the last 2 years. I would have turned around and said, look, this is what a governor can do. Just what I told you, right? This is what legally I can do. I cannot shut you down. I cannot tell you that you're not unessential. I cannot tell you that your children have to go to school and break the law that's already on the books. And so many of the things that I will be doing is making sure that our legislature, when they pass a law, has sufficient teeth in it that we can enforce it, and there will be penalties for it. No more soft business, no soft pillows and that kind of thing. But we're going to start working towards making sure that when there's a law in place, that it will have teeth to it. And as far as bail reform, and guess what? You do the crime, you have to do the time, no more soft pillows. We're going to have consequences for your actions. And so when you go out and you are under the influence of drugs and you cause somebody to die, you're not going to get just a month. You're going to end up in jail for a period of time. And as far as immigration goes, no more sanctuary cities in the state of New Hampshire. I will demand from the legislature that we have a bill that goes through for me to sign that says we will not have sanctuary cities. We're not going to have to put up. The other thing is that as far as illegal, it is illegal for them to come over and drop these people off. So what we're going to do, you can come on, we'll arrest you at the point of entry. As soon as you get here, we'll take care of it. You want to come in as an illegal, we'll arrest you and put you in jail. And now I know it's going to cost us some money, but if we did this in several states, we'll build our own wall around our own communities. So these are some of the things that I really want to do and make sure that we're a no-nonsense state anymore. we've got our state sovereignty, and we're gonna put it, make sure that other people know that this is the state of New Hampshire. And oh, by the way, you sent, sheriffs, you were elected by the people. You are our last wall, in essence, against the federal government overreach. And we're going to make sure that you're going to do your job. Any questions?
Can we pass a law to have parents opt kids into sex education instead of opting out of sex education?
Sex education doesn't belong in schools.
This one says, discuss briefly teaching of CRT.
CRT doesn't belong in schools either.
That's pretty good. Maybe you could elaborate a little more.
Well, so the whole thing about CRT is it is in our schools. Don't even fantasize about it. It's in our schools. So is communism, by the way. Because when I worked back in the late 90s trying to find out about Goals 2000, we laid the Communist Manifesto side by side with Goals 2000 and went over it page by page by page, and the overlap was incredible. So we convinced Ovid Lamontagne at the time, who was the chairman of the state school board, and we convinced him and Senator Jean Shaheen, who was governor at the time, to be the only state in the union to turn down Goals 2000. Well, Goals 2000 was then snuffed back through the back door in School to Work. What is School to Work? Well, it's supposed to be that communist idea where we take everybody and we train them and we dumb them down to the point where all they do is become good little citizens and they do exactly as they're told, right? So, but we changed the name. It's no longer Goals 2000. Now it's No Child Left Behind. Now it's Common Core. It's the same stuff. It's just coming back at us over and over and over again. So we've been teaching communism in our schools, and we need to stop it.
Your thoughts about giving more support to parents for alternatives to public education?
I'm a big fan of parents are the primary stakeholders. They're the ones that should make that decision about where they send their children to school. And I think they should be enabled as much as possible. I think one of the best things we have is our scholarship program. Not necessarily from the state, although the state program is really nice, except they need to get rid of, if they're going to treat everybody the same, there should be no limits on who can apply for that money. It should be across the board. But, you know, as far as making a choice, it's up to the parents. And there should be also something done about taxes, and I have a whole discussion about that. At some point we should discuss it, because, you know, when people pay off their house and they have been in the community for however long, what happens, especially with our senior citizens, is as the taxes go up and up and up, at some point they can't pay their taxes. 3 years without you paying your taxes and the city can take it over. That's not right. Somehow we need to come up with a solution. I don't know what it is. I keep thinking about it over and over again. There are people who don't have children in the school, and they're coerced into paying taxes for children that they don't have. Somehow, property taxes are not totally the answer, but I'm not sure what the answer really is. But I do believe that parents are the ones that should be able to choose where you send your child, and we enable them as much as we can.
Thank you. There's two questions on this one. Maybe you could just reiterate your thoughts on pro-life, and what do you think about the COVID RNA, DNA shots.
Well, there's been some, I'm taking the second one first, there's been some new discoveries, and I don't know how much of them are accurate, but it's a very interesting discussion that's going on now amongst the, what do you call those doctors, the rebel doctors, or, you know? Some of the ones, the frontline doctors, some of the ones that have been coming out with other than the party line. What was the first part? Oh, pro-life, right. So I believe that life begins at conception and continues until natural death. I'm not a proponent of assisted suicide or any other way of destroying human life. Our Constitution says that we are to defend and enjoy life. That defend is really very important. But the current governor has done everything he can to use your tax dollars to destroy life. He's even gone to the point where, well, he signed the bill, right, that's going to be basically codifying Roe v. Wade up to 6 months, or, I mean, really. The whole thing is that every life is precious. And, you know, the other thing that you hear about, well, they go to the doctor. I'm not even a big fan of ultrasounds in some respects, because if it was me, I wouldn't be, it's not going to make any difference if that child is going to be handicapped in any way. And how many times does, when the ultrasound comes back and you say to the person, hey, your child's going to have Down syndrome, and those parents that decide, that's okay, I'm going to still have a child, and the child's born normal, how many times does that happen? And if you go ahead and destroy the law on the prospect, you've just destroyed a human being that was made in the image of God. That's not our position.
It's a similar question we gave Ed. It's a new deal for businesses to get tax exemptions for building low-income housing.
So I'm not a proponent of any sort of subsidy, because I think that if it's going to work, you can do it on the free market, and that's the way we should be going in that direction. But as far as housing, I'm confused about the housing, I will be honest. We keep hearing that we don't have sufficient housing in the state, and yet our population isn't growing that much. So I'm not sure whether this is something else that's going on. But the other thing that I find is very interesting is that this governor keeps telling everybody how he cut taxes and he's brought in all of this money, and he's applied for this, the $27 million that he had everybody arrested for and all of that. But yet, CSNBC did a study, and New Hampshire ranks, guess where? 37 in business infrastructure. Okay, what is one of the major things in the business infrastructure? It's energy, the cost of energy. So Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck both were looking at New Hampshire as a place to come and relocate when they were in New York, and it was so expensive in New York. They looked at the energy costs. Their whole business uses energy. So I tried to talk to our governor about using unspent nuclear fuel. I had an expert in the state. I had him face to face with the governor, and the governor turned around and said, hey, I believe in nuclear, but that's a federal problem. Thank you very much. But this man was going to tell you how we could use the unspent nuclear fuel over at Seabrook and raise the energy, produce the energy for 250 years in the state of New Hampshire. He didn't want to talk about that. When I become governor, that's one of the first things we're going to do. we're gonna use that money that's been set aside in Washington DC for exactly this purpose. And we're gonna generate jobs, and we're gonna figure out how to reduce the cost of energy in the state of New Hampshire.
Well, let's give both of these intrepid people who are looking a better way to spend a Thursday evening. You want to both come up and
Sure.
we'll just open it up. There was one question that I think I can get to the essence of the question concerning the timing of local town elections, getting involved with state elections. My own personal thought on this is the Republican primary, the timing of that, but that's where this question came from originally, and I just added onto it concerning the timing of our primary. It's so late. The Democrats don't really do primaries, and they're out there campaigning right now, whereas you folks won't know who wins this primary until sometime September, which I think that gives us a handicap personally, but if I haven't done this question justice, perhaps...
Yeah, that's my question. So apparently our local elections for school board and city council and councilors or whatever are, yes, they're off the cycle of the regular.
Right.
And it was interesting because the Cato Institute indicated that was one of the problems, because New Hampshire actually is doing pretty well on freedom, number one. But that's one of the issues, that they have gone off cycle with the local school board elections from the regular state elections, and so it allows a lot of people not to show up, which they don't, and it gives them more control. So what do each of you think about that?
I'll shoot on that, maybe a couple things. First of all, the Democratic Party is unified, focused, and they had an agenda in this last election, and it was to take over all of the school board positions possible in the state of New Hampshire. They have funding, they have focus. I went to 8 towns on election day to support local candidates for school board from all over the place, Raymond, Kensington, all over the place, wherever I could go help people as fast as I possibly could. So I will say this first of all, we have to be focused come next March. We have to be united. We have to support people understanding, what do we always say about town elections? They're what? Nonpartisan. How many times have you heard that, right? Do the Democrats act like that? No. Not at all. So if they're going to stay in March, if that's what, and I don't know what the right answer is to that, we need to have a unified front as Republicans to not only match them, but to really to fund these candidates and to get out and support them. The governor never did that. Period, end of story. There's no record of him doing that at all. And I used every means I could to support people in our area. We need to be focused, get behind them, and win back our communities, because right now it matters. It matters so much. And those school board positions are training grounds for someone like myself to step up and run for the next office. So we have to do that. The primary, would you like my opinion on the early or the late primary?
Yeah.
I would just to shoot it out there. I'll make it very simple. Sununu does not believe he has a Republican primary that he's in. He thinks he can coast through, cater to Democrats and the leftists the entire time, and then go into a general election and campaign for 8 weeks against somebody who doesn't have the name recognition and maybe they've been through a little bit of a battle or whatever. He did it for political reasons. I don't like having a primary so late. I would want to look at maybe lining up with July or August. I think August is almost too late to give candidates the time to grow into what they're doing and to be prepared for the Democrats. Remember, the Democrats have, how much money does Maggie Hassan have? 14 million? Is that what does she have more than that now? 14.7 million, I heard, right? She's been raising money the whole time. Republican candidates are in a fight. And then once they're in a fight against each other, and then they've got 8 weeks for a general. So I would want to back it up several weeks. Does that even come close?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe you could jump in.
Sure. So I have a little bit different opinion because, first of all, I think that it's important for every one of us to get involved. And this is our biggest problem, is that we don't show up. I mean, heck, Dan here had how many, was it 78 people who signed your petition, whatever it was about the machines? And when it came time to actually show up at this town meeting and vote on it, 2/3 of them showed up. So they didn't get what they wanted to get. They signed a petition to do it. So the involvement is all a decision. And what we have to do is we have to be focused enough that we want to get involved, that we show up. And so the reason I say this is because I won an election. I was called up the night before sign-ups. 30 days later was the election. I won by 1 vote. Okay? You don't need all the time in the world to do the campaign. You just need to get out there and do it. Number one, you need to go door knocking, which is something that you have to do here in New Hampshire. It's retail politics. March elections have been going on in the state since I came here, or some almost 30 years ago. So that's not the problem. The problem is that we don't get involved. We don't care enough to get involved. And we can do it if we get out there and vote. The other thing is that, you don't need a whole lot of money. I ran, okay, so here's my story from how did I get involved in running for governor? I was sleepless in Seattle. You're not going to believe it. I really was sleepless in Seattle in 2009, and I got the run for governor. So I waited a week, and I finally said to David, I think I'm supposed to run for governor. I came here, and the people I talked to kept saying, you can't do it, you can't raise enough money, you can't do it. My father owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. If he wants me to run, I'll run. I did not have any debt at the end of my run. I got 10%, there were 4 of us in the race. And, the whole thing is I was told also, don't talk about life, don't talk about family, only talk about taxes. Well, I talked about life, I talked about family, and I spent 5 cents a vote. You don't need a whole lot of money. Look at the guy down in New Jersey, $150. And he wins against an incumbent. We have to have the message, we have to have the enthusiasm, and we have to have people that care enough to get out and go to the polls.
Yeah, let's take some questions from the floor. I think I covered all the questions that were submitted, but if you want to elaborate or to get a little deeper or come up with something new.
Sure, here we go.
Bob?
Yeah, I actually comments. One is, I actually looked up this thing that I talked about. It's an RSA. It says that by law, the school board and the town elections may not be held, or they must be held in off-election years. So the legislature needs to get forward. Second thing, quickly, I wish I had invented this term, but somebody said it and it was brilliant. Social justice begins in the womb. If you are a social justice warrior, you must be pro-life. So that's something that you can have that discussion. The third thing is on the illegals. The federal government uses the term illegal aliens. The federal government. So do not call these people illegal migrants.
No.
A migrant is a person who presents themselves at the border and asks to come in and meet certain criteria. If believe it or not, I actually read a lot of the Build Back Better plan 6-9 months ago, and that whole section on illegals, the term illegal alien was used over and over and over. So that's the term the government uses. So they're not migrants. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Sandy?
There's all kinds of states that have a major focus on one particular item that is so desperate that they need to pass it right now. What condition is New Hampshire in that that they have to have this solved before we can even go further? What would you say that would be?
Election integrity.
I believe that's true, yeah.
Yeah, your vote has to count. And I'm not sure that we're gonna get it solved by the time the 2022 elections come around. And I've heard opinions left and right about whether or not that's really important, but I do think it's very, very important. The last elections, you just look at Marilyn Todd's work and Michael and Dell and all of these people who've been going around, and then you look at what happened down in Wyndham, and you look at the latest discoveries in Londonderry and the discoveries down in Bedford of extra ballots that were never counted. I mean, for crying out loud, and I hear all the time, and thank you very much, Senator Guida, for your bill, I hear all the time of parents who tell me about their children in other states, surrounding states, at colleges in surrounding states, I should say, that are encouraged to come to New Hampshire to vote. You know, until we get that fixed, it's a debacle.
I know, I agree.
Yeah.
So I would include election integrity under an open and transparent government. So we need to take a look at what is actually happening. And there's many different avenues that we need to take, okay? But with, again, the 58% of Republicans and 30% of Democrats not believing in how our elections are done, that has to be a priority. But the overarching theme has got to be, we've got to look at corruption. We've got to look at what is actually happening. Why is the governor not working with the state reps? These are a lot of things that we have to open up filing cabinets and go through piece by piece. Because a lot of Granite Staters just don't believe what is happening in Concord right now is good. And they definitely, the majority of Americans don't believe what's happening in America, that we are heading on the wrong track. To fix that, open and transparent government works. You cannot have election integrity without an open and transparent government. So I would start with that as the caveat for everything. And then we've got to answer the question with boots on the ground. This includes training of our clerks, training of our town clerks. And we've got to make sure that when a Republican poll watcher walks in to watch a poll, that they actually have the support of the communities that they're walking into, and it is fair and just. And any injustices that are going on on election day are immediately addressed because we have processes put in place, tactical plans put in place, and support of the clerks and support of the towns that make that a reality for people. It's got to be, and that all has to be open. So everybody feels comfortable walking in. Oh, there's the Republican poll watcher, there's the Democrat poll watcher, oh, there's Barry, that guy who always complains about every election anyway. He's standing back there and he's watching too. That open and transparency, I believe, is our overarching huge problem we have in politics today.
No machines. No machines.
Please, no machines, no machines.
If I could just share a 2-minute story, I volunteered to be a poll watcher in Plymouth. Figured, well, that's the heart of where things are going to go wrong. So my time slot was given to me by Steve Stepanek, our chair. And I arrived at the appropriate time. It was early afternoon on a Monday. And the clerk said to me, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I'm here to be poll watching and counting of the absentee ballots." They said, "Oh, we did that Saturday." I said, "Well, nobody notified me." "Oh, we notified the Secretary of State Friday afternoon." I said, "What, around 4:15 or so?" "Oh, yeah, maybe about that." I said, "Were any good guys watching, poll watching?" "What do you mean good guys?" I said, "Republicans." Maybe, I don't know, I don't think so.
So here's another thing, as an aside. Who is the one officer in the state who is responsible for the elections? The Secretary of State. The Secretary of State in the past has, the training needs to be done, it needs to be logically done and efficiently done, but the reality is that the Secretary of State many times will sidestep and say, oh, well, it's all up to the moderators. Well, if the moderators haven't been trained properly, and if the moderators aren't being watched and you can't go in, as Dave was talking about, then it doesn't do us any good. But the person that needs to be held accountable, and we need a good Secretary of State. Bill Gardner has stepped down after 40 some odd years. The reality is that that man, I believe, was complicit in helping us make our elections unreliable.
Yeah.
And there are so many times when we took things to him, including voter fraud. Here's 2 applications from the same community with the same name and different handwriting on it. Do you think something's wrong here? Oh, no, we don't have election fraud here. We heard that from the Attorney General's office too. Under Callie Ayoff, we heard that. So we have to have people at every level, but it's also up to every one of us to hold everybody accountable. And you may not be able to do everything, but each one of us in this 1.4 million person state has a passion that they can watch. And if we all do our little job and stay involved and be involved as community members, then we'll cover it and we'll get it done. But we have to be involved, everyone.
Amen.
More questions? Going once? Twice? Okay, thank you both very much.
Testerman.com. I've got information over there. Please take the information and every one of those pieces of paper is different. So, I mean, there's 4 different subjects over there. So please help yourself. And I need your vote. I need your money. I hate to say I need your money, but I need your vote. And I need your involvement. So thank you very much. And thank you all for coming out tonight.
Final word.
Thank you for coming. Just something to mention. When Ron DeSantis stepped in as governor of New Hampshire, 80,000 more Democrats were registered than Republicans.
You said New Hampshire, you meant.
I was Florida. See, I'm New Hampshire. 400,000 Republicans are registered over Democrats now in the state of Florida. The energy and enthusiasm in the Republican Party when I win this will be phenomenal. You won't be able to hold meetings in this room anymore. We'll bring them all out, we'll get them excited, we'll get them fired up. Again, thatforgovernor.com. I have all the pamphlets, all the good stuff over there, and a QR code. And hey, I love selfies. That proves that I was somewhere for my kids. So if you want to take a picture or anything like that, that's great. Thanks to Karen. We had fun on Monday. We had fun doing this.